Let's show a little bit first about what we're going to cover. We mentioned the new YouTube PyCharm channel. It has a playlist in it, Django with PyCharm tips and tricks with 20 in it, and that's what we're going to be going over. There's a repo that goes with it under Paul Everett, Django tutorial. This is the starting point that all of the tips are done as. The tips are going to make it into the PyCharm guide, which is jetbrains.com PyCharm guide. I have one playlist right now, well, two playlists. I have a playlist for 42 tips and tricks, and we're actually going to do the first 4 of these as we begin the webinar for this. We also have some screencasts that we did as part of the DSF campaign. Ernst, if you get a chance, if you could paste that URL into the chat channel for anybody that wants to see those. So with that in mind, the screencast started with 2 kind of tips that I'm not going to cover in this just because they mess up the flow a little bit of the presentation because they kind of take over the whole screen and stuff. Create new project and open existing project. I'll just kind of mimic them. And what that means is in PyCharm, you do file, new project, and you say Django, and we do a lot of choices for you. You give a name for the project. We give you different ways to create your virtual environment. I just accept what it's already chosen. And my policy is to put virtual environments inside the project because that's the way God intended, not somewhere under your home directory. That's madness. Once it remembers my choice on that, PyCharm will apply it to future projects until I change my mind. And then you can do some Django specific settings, such as you see here. We'll generate a skeletal project, open it in a new window, turn on all the Django policy settings, make an environment, and all the 57 other things. Pretty cool. Let's say though, I want to open a project that's on GitHub. It's a Django project, and I want PyCharm to do all the work for me to make an environment and wire everything up and all that other kind of stuff. So with that, what I would do is VCS, import from version control, get from version control, and I can either paste in the repository URL, but we have GitHub support, so I can start typing something like Django tutorial, and out of all the registered with all the organizations I'm in GitHub, it found this repo, and if I cloned it, it would clone it into a directory that I wanted and wire up all the Django support. Since I've mentioned that a couple of times, let me go over to what that means, the Django support, so to speak. In preferences, we have languages and frameworks support for Django, and this thing turns on a lot of the magic. So that's create project and open project. I'm going to get over to the IDE side a little bit and then come back to these 20 tips and tricks. From an IDE perspective, at the moment, I've customized my IDE just a little bit. I turned on Darkula, the theme, the dark theme, and that is under the color scheme. I'm actually Darkula Webinar, which is my bigger font setting using the JetBrains mono font. So I've done that customization so far. I've set the theme and the font, and I did one other thing. I have a plugin called Presentation Assistant, and I've got it turned on, description of actions, so that when I do things, watch, I'm going to hit a hotkey, I'm going to hit a key binding. Watch down here, you're going to see something pop up and tell you what I hit, what's the name of the action, and what are the keystrokes on the other platforms. So you'll be able to follow along a little bit as I do some of these keystrokes. With that in mind, I'm going to take a look at these first 4 tips that are generic to all of PyCharm, which will get us set for doing the Django specific tips. And then I will take any questions that you might have, or any points you want to make before we get into the Django support. So the first one is and on each of these tips, you can go visit the tip, see a short video, see a write-up, and hear me speak for a long video. The one keystroke the one ring that binds them all. I'm a man of a certain age. I can't be bothered to remember 500 key bindings. Instead, I just remember one, and that one is find action. And from there, I can get to everything else like refactor rename. So find action on the Mac is Command-Shift-A, and on other platforms, it's this. So find action is the first one that I want to cover. Reduce clutter by disabling tools. We are an IDE. IDEs are integrated, hence the I. Meaning they can do a lot of things, but then they take up a lot of real estate on your screen because they're doing a lot of things. I prefer a kind of a slimmed down mode, so I turn off some of the IDE features so that I can focus on my code. The things I turn off are the toolbar, the toolbar windows. There they go. That's a pretty distracting one for me. I usually don't turn off the status bar, the thing at the bottom, because I use it for my VCS stuff, but I will turn it off for this webinar. And then, somewhat controversially, I turn off the navigation bar because I have a tip where I talk about activating the navigation bar only on demand. I will leave the activation bar on so you can kind of follow along on where I am in the hierarchy. And then, because a lot of the tips that I have in 42 tips and tricks are about how to use the keyboard, not the mouse, I turn off the project tool so I can focus on the code. All right, so that reduces clutter. And then another sacred cow, I turn off tabs, and that's one that's a step too far for some people. Tab placement, none, because I move around not by files, I move around by symbols. That's the way I speed things up. I also move around by tip number 4, which is to use recent files to jump around between things I've worked on recently, such as views, and I can speed type to get that. And then I can go back to where I was. I can even speed type to get to things like the terminal on the left-hand side. You can use recent files, this recent files pop-up. You can use that not to get to just files, but also to the tool windows since I turned them off. I'll pause there. Ernst, got anything to comment on so far?
Well, so far we didn't get all that many questions, but there's one thing that I'd like you to show people. If you turn the status bar back on.
Sure. I think I know what you're going to say.
You know, the little button on the bottom left?
This one?
No, the bottom left. That one is also cool.
Oh, bottom left. Sorry, to turn back on the tool windows. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a very easy way to turn them back on and off.
Yep.
Well, if you click the actual button on the bottom left, it'll turn them on around the sides. If you just click it with the left button rather than the right button.
Yep.
And then,
or if you want to go to one without turning it on, you can.
Yeah. So a quick tip for people who want to go a little bit in this direction, but not go all the way.
And now, that's a good one because I usually leave the status bar on.
So
still,
how about,
I don't like to use that to go to a tool because that's a mouse instead of a keyboard.
That's true. So how about this interpreter choice?
Yes, I will show it. You talk it. How about that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So we've made it easier recently to choose what interpreter you want to use. We show you what interpreter you've got currently configured for your project and we're using for code completion in the status bar. And by clicking it, you can change it to something else, or you can add a new interpreter there, or see all the interpreter settings you've got configured. We can see here that Paul has the Python 3.8 virtual and called Django tutorial configured. But for example, if you wanted to try working with a different version of Django, it would be very easy to click Add Interpreter here and create a new virtual and then install a different version of Django. And then you can switch back and forth very quickly and easily.
Right, and like I have a library I develop and I want to test on different versions of Python, and that's easy to switch. Sure, I can run tests under Tox and things like that, but it's not going to give me the IDE won't be switching itself in code analysis to the other interpreter. So having multiple versions of Python is one reason for doing this.
Yeah. And we just got a question from Fred. What are the implications of turning tabs off? I'm sure that's going to be your next tip, isn't it?
I'm not going to go through that one too much. I really make the case in here in this video and talking about the downsides, the reasons for not doing it. What it means is you need to learn other ways to navigate instead of using instead of having everything open, 20 tabs, my entire project is open, and now I have to use my eyeballs and memory to jump between things. If I want to go to the index view, maybe I just want to navigate by symbol to index view.
And how did you open the navigate a symbol window?
That's how I jump around between things. I don't have 20 tabs open. I have one thing open. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but how did you open that go to symbol window?
How do I open it and go to a single window? What do you mean?
How do you had that go to symbol option?
Mm-hmm. Find action, or sorry, I did, and you should be able to watch the thing at the bottom. Oh, wait, over. Navigate the symbol.
Yeah, I got a little bit blocked by the actual window.
What's that?
It got blocked by the actual window.
Yeah, right. So we have ways of jumping to file names, classes, a string, anything, all under this kind of search everything, search anywhere approach. I will say, and I show this in the tips that talk about testing. Let me see, TDD. It's one of the tests I talk about. If you need two things side by side, you can split, say, vertically and get two different things open at once without having tabs. I usually do TDD mode this way.
Cool. All right, well, back to the regular programming.
Back to the regular programming. All right. So on to the first tip. And we're going to go through the tips as they appear in order in the playlist. And just to be clear on that, I mean this playlist. So we're going to start with this tip. We have special Django support. What does that mean by special Django support? We'll start kind of near the top, the settings.py of my site. And I've got this string here. And it doesn't, I mean, it's a string. It's not a symbol, so to speak. It's not like this. We know that installed apps has a list of strings where these strings are kind of Python package name kinds of things, and that these are special in Django. And if I want to jump to that, I can navigate to. Oh, why can't I navigate to that? I've done something wrong. Straight out of the gate. I believe I must have renamed something before getting started on this. So let me go to polls, config, and make sure. All right, and go back. All right. If I put a symbol that is wrong on this, I will get a warning on it. So in the process of getting started on filming all of these, I left this in a state that was a little bit messed up. All right, what I will do is come over to here and show. Django has some strings with special semantics, such as installed apps. We taught PyCharm those semantics. So for example, if I start over on the typing, I get autocomplete. That's really what that tip was showing anyway. App, autocomplete, polls config. All right. So on to the next tip, the Django dependency diagram. Oh, and I should mention that when I go over to those, I can navigate forwards and backwards. What I'm doing for forwards and backwards navigation, again, this is a replacement for tabs. if I go to something like here, I can navigate forwards and backwards using a hotkey. On the Mac, it is Command right, Command left. All right, and I usually go into full screen mode, but I won't because I've got to show some things with the browser a little bit later. All right, so with this installed apps, I can do autocomplete. So I'll stop at that point. Django Dependency Diagram. Let's say I want to go to my models file. And I'm in choice, and I'm like, I want a visualization of this model, what it depends on, what are its relationships to other kinds of things. Tip number 1 was find action, since I can't remember everything. So find action, and I'm going to say show diagram, and I just have to type a little bit of it. Hit enter. I choose Django Model Dependency Diagram. Should mention these things are all in PyCharm Professional Edition, has the support for Django, not the Community Edition. I hit enter, and it generates a diagram of relations, cardinality, things like that in that model that I was on. Pretty handy. That's one of the things that we get a lot of tweets about, that people really like that. Django, let's see, I did installed apps. I'll do run migrations. Let's say, since I'm sitting here, let's say I change this to 300, and that's going to need a make migrations run, which means a trip to manage.py. The I in integrated development environment, IDE, means that we try to bring the workflows that you have into the tool, so that when you know one thing, you know everything. We have manage.py support. So I want to run a manage.py task. I choose the manage.py tool, and it gives me this tool window with special support for manage.py, such as auto-completion on the manage.py commands, as well as the arguments. And then I run that. And when I take a look and see what happened, these are the files that were changed. Let me roll those back. And I will delete that one. All right, so manage.py support is pretty handy because you can leave that window open just like our terminal window or just like our console window. And notice that in our PyCharm console, if you're in a Django project, we will load some of the Django stuff. But in the case of the manage.py window, unlike the terminal window, we will go ahead and fire up the manage.py task with everything loaded for it. Django Navigate View to Template, staying within PyCharm. This is a great one. So I'm sitting in a view, and this is my index view for the polls application. And I want to get from the view to the template. And sure, I could go over to the Files tool and splunk my way down and forget what I was even trying to work on. I could come over here and click in the gutter, though. It will take you directly to the template. If I'm sitting on the template, what if I want to go back to the view that is associated with this template? Click here, and it says where it's referenced from, and I can go back to it. There is a mouse hover on these as well. Or if you want to not really have to move the mouse to do this, if I'm sitting in the file, I can do navigation, Command B, to jump to that, because it thinks that's a symbol, not just a string, because we read the semantics of that. All right, that's navigate view to template. Just to be clear, if I messed up the name of the template, we know and we tell you that you've got an unresolved name. In fact, I think we'll show autocomplete. Yeah, we'll show autocomplete. Actually, we'll show autocomplete now. I'm sitting in a view, and I'm writing the code for the view, and I get to the template name, and in fact, I'll do the autocomplete for that. We know this class-based view, subclasses from generic list view. It wants something called template name. I'm sitting in here. I could just type everything out. I will probably make a mistake, or I could let autocomplete come to the rescue because, and this is actually a little smarter than you think it is, because we've got to understand this Django idea that there's a polls app with a templates directory, and then a convention. The Django convention is to have the next hop be the name of the app, and then the next hop be the name of the template. And when I say the name of the app, what I mean is the app name. And if I were to come in and put a typo in the app name and go back, then that's going to mess up the application. So we're doing it based on what this app name thing is. All right, so that's autocomplete on template name values. And again, there's part convenience, but there's also just not making a mistake. You're always better off letting the IDE complete the name for you, just so you don't make a mistake on it. Okay, Django Refactor Rename. This is one of those that becomes really useful for an IDE in general, when there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done and you let your IDE do it for you. For example, let's say I want to change the name of my app from polls to my polls. I could go and rename it and then try to figure out all the places that it's used. I won't remember. I'll make a mistake. I'll forget something, and it's a whole bunch of work. What if my IDE could do it? What if my IDE knew, because it indexed everything, it knew where all the bodies were buried, it could find all the symbols and change the name of the symbols with a refactor rename. And I'll say my polls. I'm going to tell it to look for references, but also in strings, because Django has some of these magic strings. Do a refactor. It's going to tell you all the places it proposes to rename, just to make sure you know what you're about to do, and then go do the refactor. It's made all the changes. It changed VCS for me. What did it actually change? Look at all of these places where it found that symbol for me. Let's say I make that change and I say, oh my God, that was a dumb idea. Well, actually, let me show some of these. Like in detail.html, that was moved. But let's say I look at all this and I'm like, that was a bad idea. And now I have to go to 50 files and find all the places and fix it. Wouldn't it be awesome if I could just in one editor transaction, undo that editor transaction, undo that refactoring, and it puts everything back, including VCS, back in the way that it was. So that is a pretty cool feature. We should be talking in Q2 about more of these refactorings. These are workflows that slow you down and you choose not to do them just because there's so much work. So that's refactor rename. I'm 1/3 of the way through. Ernst, I'll pause here. You got anything?
No questions from our audience, but I do have a question for you yourself. You were using the local history a little bit earlier. Now, we know that local history is something that really can help people out every once in a while. Could you show it in a little more detail?
That's a very good point. I will do it in two forms. So let's say I'm in my views and I do a whole bunch of typing. This is in between git commits. So git can't save me. What can save you though is our local history, which is like git, but it's always happening. It's always recording every editor transaction and giving you a browsable list going back to some point in time of essentially every change. And you can go to them and see a diff. I'm not choosing anything that's a good diff. All right, so choosing a diff and applying a change that wouldn't have been possible because it wasn't between a commit boundary, including deleting a file. If I deleted that file and it wasn't previously put into git, then I'm kind of screwed. But the IDE knows that that file was there, and it could resurrect that file for you. Does that answer the question, Ernst?
That completely answers the question. Thank you for showing that.
All right, anything to add to that local history part?
I don't think so.
All right, cool. I talked a little bit about the unresolved paths. So if I mistype a file name and say like my index, then we will get a warning with the entire warnings system that is built into the IDE. You can look for warnings everywhere and stuff like that, telling me that this path doesn't exist. So that's a helpful thing. And the path completion appears in a number of other places that we will see in a bit. Let's say I'm working on a view, a class-based view, and I want to use one of those meta classes that are useful in Django for configuring a view or a model or something. Then I have support for these. Let me bring up my tip to see which one I did for this. All right, yeah, I did it in a model, not in a view. So I'm going to go back to the models. And we'll say in the choice, that's the one I did in the demo, I have a meta class, and I'll put pass in it for right now. And I later on want to put in some of the values that do this configuration. And what's nice about it is we can do the autocomplete because we know what are the options of this, such as something called managed. I do the autocomplete and I want to set it to true or false in this case. I think false is overriding the default. So being able to autocomplete on the configurations of models using the meta system is a handy feature of our Django support. Here's one that's aimed at our Django template support. Comes from our sister product WebStorm, which is our IDE for the web. That's bundled into PyCharm Professional, so we inherit all those features for JavaScript libraries like React and things like that, and HTML support. And what's interesting is it can be combined between templating languages. I'm sitting in a template, and I'll go to the template support for Python template language. So this project is configured to support Django templates. And so we've kind of injected, we said, this is a Django template file. Well, it's also HTML. The two are related. So I get all the features I would get in an HTML file, such as Emmet support. What's Emmet? Emmet is a shorthand system, popular in a lot of different products, for quickly generating trees of markup. So for example, I might want to put a div with a class of container containing an H1. And when I hit tab, it will construct all that kind of noise for me, put my cursor in here so I can put some title. The Emmet system has a whole bunch of support for deeply nested things, ULs and LIs and numbering support and a lot of different features. Take a look at it if you find yourself typing up a lot of markup. All right, so that's Emmet support. Let's talk a little bit more about templating. This is a place I think where a lot of Django developers spend a lot of time in templating. And having the IDE help you in template development is pretty important because it's not Python. It's this special thing called a Django template. It has its own semantics, grammar, and stuff like that. How can we be more productive when working in Django? So for example, let's say right here, and notice I did start new line and it indented it correctly for me. That's a feature in all of our IDEs. Let's say my cursor is in the middle of here. I don't have to go to the end and then hit enter. I can just do shift enter, start new line, and it does it in a smart way. So let's say that I'm sitting in this spot and I want to do a block. We have things called live templates in our platform, and in PyCharm, we have live templates that will do all kinds of interesting Python things, but they will also do Django template things, such as generate a block right here. I can say block, and it's going to put the cursor in the next part of the live template, which is the some name for the block name. You see the red square is prompting me for finishing this live template. So I hit enter, and I've created a new block. Where are those live templates defined? In preferences, you see all the categories of live templates that we support. Django is one of them. So we have some Django live templates. Here's what they are. Here's the block one. Notice this is what it looks like to have that live template block. It's going to go look for a variable that you type in there. Can I add my own live templates? Why, sure, you can. You can add a new live template in the Django group and then define it to not just automate a whole chunk of markup that you might want to do, but kind of interactively generate so that it will put your cursor in different spots for you to fill in parameters for that kind of template. Now, the big one. I talked about Django templates are this other world, kind of like it's kind of like Python, but different. So your Python tools like MyPy and things like that aren't going to help you in here. And when you get confused, you can't just print something. You can't do your normal PDB debugging kinds of things. We have support for debugging in Django templates. And it is worth its weight in gold for removing mystery. So for example, let's say I want to figure out, am I really getting into last question list? And what is the last question list? I want to step through the generation of these list items in this UL. So I'm going to set a breakpoint on this line, but I'm setting a breakpoint on a template line, not a Python line. And now if I run the Django tutorial, but instead of running it the normal way, I'm going to run it under the debugger. And it's going to fire up. And I've got it set, I've got this, I'll show this in a moment. I've got this run configuration set up to automatically open my browser on this URL. And when the browser issues a request to Django, Django is going to send it to the view, which sends it to this template, which has a breakpoint. And when rendering the breakpoint, the debugger is going to say, or when rendering the template, the debugger is going to say, wait, there's a breakpoint, stop execution on this line. So it stopped execution on this line. I can do all of my normal high-end PyCharm visual debugging features, such as looking at the latest question list. And I could even open up an evaluate expression and type in questions interactively, poking around, trying to find out what the problem is. And I could continue execution by stepping into the first question. So let's see what the question looks like. Here's the question. It has an ID of 1, it has a pub date, it has a question text of first question. The question text is what's going to be inserted right there. Debugger, Django, great feature. And the debugger in general, the PyCharm debugger is a feature we work on actively. Ernst, I will stop there and see if there are any debugger questions or any other questions.
Yeah, I don't have any debugger questions, but I do have one about the Django model diagram. Somebody asked if it's possible to export diagrams.
All right, so let me go back to models and I will regenerate this. All right, and I believe this is it. Is that it? Yep. We can export as an image. Are there other ways to export, Ernst? Do you know?
Well, there is this floppy disk icon there. I'm not sure what that does.
Oh, all right, UML. If you don't want UML, I don't know what you want. UML, been around a while. So that's one we'll continue on, but if that person wants to ask a follow-up question, you can shuttle it over to the dev team channel.
Sure, thank you.
Yep. Okay, next tip is opening PyCharm or opening a browser whenever you start the server. I accidentally triggered that one already, but I'll show it. If I want to speed up my turnaround time and have it so that whenever I run, I automatically have a browser start up at a URL, I can come in, edit my run configuration, and these run configurations are specialized in PyCharm Professional for Django, and they ask questions on the run configuration that are kind of unique to Django. And one of them is this option about running a browser when you run this run configuration. And if you want to run the browser, do you also want to say and go to this particular URL? And then this is a fun one from the WebStorm side about being able to do debugging, meaning you can stop on breakpoints in a Chrome browser, but use the PyCharm visual debugger. Anyway, I've got this set up, and now when I run the Django server in PyCharm, it's going to open the window, but it's also going to open a browser to that URL. So that just speeds things up for me a little bit. All right, I will close that down. And let's see, that covers the Django Open Browser. Create Django template from usage. Let's say I'm in a view. And I'm going to, let's say I make a new view. I'll do this. My view, and I have a template, and its name is going to be polls/myview.html, which doesn't exist. And it tells me it doesn't exist. I could stop what I'm doing, go over to the project tool, navigate to the directory, type this name back in, forget what I was doing, or let the IDE create this template file for me, letting me choose what it guessed at was the place to put it, asking me if I want it in VCS. Why, yes, I do. Thank you for asking. And it's created a new template in the correct path, the Django apps templates directory with that convention of app name and then template name. And that's a pretty handy thing. And I've got my connection back to the view. So I will delete that. That's create template from usage. Django autocomplete in class-based views. If I'm making a class, all of these values are completable based on, but I showed that a second ago. If I make a, and I want to say model for this, then I can autocomplete on the various plug points that I got from inheriting this generic view, which is pretty handy because kind of the alternative would be, oh, I can go to the web page, I can navigate to this and navigate to the 57 superclasses to try and figure out what it does. Or I can let my IDE tell me, okay, here are the things that you can fill in here. So that's handy, and that's the kind of thing that we had to wire in special support for. Navigate to Django URLs from views, navigate from Django URLs to views from within PyCharm. So let's say that I'm sitting on this, and let me make sure I'm getting the right one on this. Navigate. This one. Oh, no, this was a different one. So let's say I go to URL patterns at the very, no, the one topper than that. At the top of my site, I've got a urls.py. And it's got a URLs pattern. And then it's got this include thing with this kind of syntax. And I want to get to, through the intermediary URL comps to get to the view. So I can navigate, let me go back. I'm in this special string with the special semantics of the name of my app and then a Python module inside that app. It's actually a package. So urls.py, I can jump to it. And then this lists the various URLs that I have defined. And let's say for the detail view, I want to go to the detail view. I can jump to that. And then if I want to get back to where I was, I use command right bracket, right bracket, right bracket. Just moves to my cursor points. And then I think, oh, wait, I did want to go back there. Command, oh, that was left bracket. Command right bracket gets me back to where I was. So again, this is part of the special syntax. We get these strings and we learn how to navigate them. Let's see, that gets me to number 15, 5 more. Ernst, got anything?
Yeah, so we're at about 45 minutes into the webinar. It looks like people just woke up and sent us a lot of questions right now.
Excellent.
So first of all, you opened the browser earlier, I think using the link in the run tool window, and everybody's asking, does this only work with Chrome?
I actually didn't click on that down here. I configured, I set up the run configuration to open quote unquote browser. Now it does the same thing you're mentioning. These links are clickable, so I can click it and it opens the quote unquote browser. What does that mean by quote unquote browser? Go to preferences and you can define the list of known browsers. And you can say that the default browser is the first listed, which is what I do. Or you can say system default, which is not what I do because I don't want to open Safari. So I had this list of browsers that are possible to open things in, and I have set Firefox to be the top. Internet freedom, baby. Woo!
That's wonderful.
Did I answer the question?
I do have 2 more questions actually. So
Sure.
First of all, I should probably ask you this before the webinar. What version of PyCharm are you using?
Released 2019.3.4, not EAP.
Because there's somebody who asked, when you're committing to VCS, is there a way to keep that window open for next commit without having to reopen it again?
And you know the answer.
I do know the answer, yeah. So in 2020.1, we have a new commit window, and this is an option. So it'll ask you the first time that you open 2020.1 and open a commit window, do you want to keep on using the window that goes away, or do you want to start using it in a toolbar on the side?
Yep.
This is brand new in 2020.1, so everybody's interested in that. I would recommend to go to our website and go to what's coming in the next version, get the EAP, and let us know how you like that. Yeah, it's something that the VCS team has been working on a very long time, and they've been working on polishing it. So be sure to give it a shot and let us know what you think. Then there was another question. Somebody asked, is it possible to add to-dos in a template, like when you add a template comment and add a to-do there?
All right, let's say I make a reminder to myself in a comment of add the extra CSS. And I want to make this a to-do by doing to-do. And then I want to open my to-do viewer. Will I see it? What do you think, Ernst? Will I see it? I don't know. This is a gamble.
I don't know either. So yeah, are we taking bets? Wow.
Damn, we got lucky on that one. So
there we
found
go.
that to-do.
To-dos in Django template comments, they actually work. You saw it here first.
Who are you going to give credit to that? Is that Pasha?
I don't know.
That's probably I don't know, probably a platform thing.
Yeah.
All right, anything else?
There's a question about generating views in the generate menu. Is that possible?
Generating the entire view, like generate this, the boilerplate for this using a live template or something.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, this view menu unfortunately is not unique, really, even to PyCharm, much less Django. It's an open question. Most of our live templates are about Django templating. So if I close Angular and look at Django, these all seem to be about Django templates, whereas our Flask support has a live template for generating a route. So one could imagine a Django live template of CBV for class-based view. Might have to have one for each one of these generic things, but one could imagine some live templates that did that.
Yeah, and you can always make them yourself. You showed earlier how to do that.
Yep, and we actually have a way to ship live templates to other people, right? You can load live templates from other people.
That I wouldn't know off the top of my head. So that's a nice homework exercise for the viewers. Go check out our documentation, see if that's possible.
All right, want to continue?
Let's go.
All right. Let's say I'm in my polls index, which makes a unordered list of each poll. So it's sitting on each question, sorry. It's sitting on a question and it's making the href to that question using the polls detail route or URL or whatever you want to call it. When I'm typing this, I might be like, what are the names of oh my God, I've got to go back to URLs.py and look at all these defined names. Wouldn't it be great if the IDE knew the names for me and let me autocomplete? In fact, if I don't even know it starts with D, give me all the known routes or URL comps for this app, since I'm at the polls level. I'm typing polls, and I can choose that, or I can choose another one. And in fact, if I'm sitting on detail and I want to go to the definition of the route, can I do Command B to get there? Yes, in fact, I can. And then I can go back to that usage of it. If I put something in that's wrong, will I get a warning? Yes. Oh, that's a typo though. That one overwrote it. Let's see. I do not yet get a squiggly telling me I've chosen something that's not defined. So that's an example of something that we need to work on. A good idea for the future. In fact, we're talking about ways to really do like refactoring of this. And if I'm sitting here and I refactor it, it's going to find all those places where I've used the URL helper and fix that and change that. So we can go like one level further on Django refactoring into template kinds of usages. Show inferred model type. Now, this is a fun one for me because I've gotten really interested in Python type hinting and stuff like that. So for example, I'm in my views and I'm sitting on, let's see, what's a good one to, oh yeah, the vote helper thing here, view. I'm sitting on here and I want to know what question is. And the problem with this is Django's got this super generic function called getObjectOrID, doesn't have any type hint on it, Python 3.6 or higher annotations. And we can't really do much analysis of its return value because it's this query set.get thing with arbitrary everything. How are we going to know what is the type of the value returned by this function? Well, PyCharm can figure things out because we have Django support and we can customize to Django methods and functions and know the first argument is going to be the type that's returned. Command hover tells me what PyCharm inferred as the type of that value. Command hover, there are other options for things you can do to get to the type information. Same thing down here, what is selected choice? I've got this get thing, this .get thing, which is similar, doesn't really have a lot of help on saying what is the return value. You're not really gonna know. because of Python and typing, but we inferred it and we know it's a choice. And so I'll do one that's a little bit similar to that. Let's say, okay, great, PyCharm, you're pretty smart. You knew the answer, but my other tools don't know the answer. How can I help them? Do I really have to manually myself type question? And maybe I do a typo and I've messed it up and I've forgotten what I was doing. I could always, though, use Alt-Enter and let PyCharm do the work for me. Yes, PyCharm, I do want you to add that type hint. And yes, that is the selection of type that I wanted. Thank you very much. Well, let's just go do this one too. Look at that. That was pretty easy. A case where PyCharm can do the janitorial work for you by generating the Python type hint information for Django variables based on its type inferencing. And now we get to the last one. Am I on the last one? Let me go over and look. Yes, the last, number 20 of 20, auto-completing the model in the template with PyCharm. So for example, I'm back over on the index, latest questions list. Where does that come from? Back in the model, I've got that the context object name is going to be named latest question list, and that's going to be the result of this query. So a sequence of questions. And then I'm going to iterate over it and assign question to each value in that query result. Meaning, if I wanted to show, instead of question text, I wanted to show the pub date, because that's what this thing is. Let's go to question. Question has a pub date. In my template, PyCharm knows that this is a question. And so I can autocomplete pub date, which is quite helpful. And there are things we can do in future releases that I'm talking with Pasha about. When I command hover on this, it kind of doesn't give me the information that I need. So it would be nice if, since PyCharm knows what the type is, reveal more of that type information. Maybe even make it easier to navigate. For example, I can Command B to navigate on this. Get rid of those imports. And that was a pretty cool navigation. Latest question list is really the context object name for this view. And it jumped to the correct line of that view. I will stop there. Ernst, do we have any final questions?
We have a couple, but given that we only have 2 minutes left and we're basically going for perfect timing here,
yes.
I propose that we go for those that we reply on email. Thank you so much, Paul, for showing us all these cool things about Django in PyCharm. If anybody has questions later that we didn't get to, well, if you asked it in the questions pane and we didn't get to it, we'll get back to you on email. Don't worry about that. If you do have any questions you haven't asked yet, you can always reach out to us through social media. We're on Twitter at PyCharm, or you can reach out to Paul directly at Paul W. Everett. We're also available. You can also, of course, always open a support request and we'll help you out specifically with your problems. Yeah, if you'd like any more information about PyCharm in general, you can find it at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. So after the webinar ends, we'll get a little bit of a survey, and please do fill that out. This recording, of course, will be made available on our YouTube channel soon. Stay tuned on both our Twitter account or our blog. We'll announce that it's published over there. If you haven't already, do check out the blog that I mentioned. On the blog, you can find up-to-date PyCharm news about releases and events, in addition to educational resources. We're also going to provide some additional links and information about this presentation on the blog, so check it out tomorrow when we'll have the post on there. And let me remind you yet again about the DSF campaign. If you get PyCharm Professional right now, it's 30% off, and the full purchase amount gets donated to the Django Software Foundation. So if you buy PyCharm, you're helping build Django. This is for new subscriptions only, so if you already have PyCharm Professional Edition, first of all, thank you so much. Second of all, be sure to tell your friends about the promotion so they can help out Django. All right, so that's everything from us today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for spending this time, and I hope everybody has a great day.